and welcome back to my channel. Bonsoir et bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel, and in this video I'm going to do something a little bit different. So I don't know about you, maybe it's just a me thing, but sometimes when I don't feel that good, I like to get annoyed at frivolous crap. I saw on my YouTube feed 2 other booktubers do reaction videos to the Times 100 best fantasy books of all time list. I didn't even know that was a thing. I think it came out last week. So I went to check it out and I have thoughts on it. Because is it really? Are those the best 100 fantasy books of all time? Methinks not quite. So, of course, I'll leave a link to said list down in the description box. You want to go check it out. First, I will say something. I agree with Daniel Green and Elliot Brooks that the main problem with this list is that it is mistitled, probably for clickbait reasons, which already annoys me. Especially coming from Time magazine, I would expect something slightly better from them, but maybe I'm just being very naive here. So apparently Time asked a panel of fantasy authors to pick their selection of favorite, most popular, most influential, most genre-defining fantasy books. But that's something a bit different, isn't it, though? If it had been titled 100 favorite fantasy books by famous fantasy authors, that'd be something else. No, they went for the best 100 fantasy books of all time, starting from the 9th century onwards. So, okay, another point you could make, of course, is that can you ever really make such a list to begin with? And that's a very fair question. But still, I think this list was bad. Okay, I'm just going to come out and say, I thought it was plain bad. It lacked an internal cohesion. It didn't make sense in some of its picks and how they were arranged. Basically, it goes in chronological order from the Arabian Nights in the 9th century to books that came out, well, I guess this year or last year. So, a point. Picking recent books for the best books of all time is going to be dicey in any case. Now, fair enough, it was the last 100 years, so you have to come up to the present. But for some of the entries, I'm like, maybe, I don't know, maybe they need to pass the test of time just a teensy bit. And I'm not saying they're bad novels, by the way. Some of the novels mentioned are novels I plan on reading and I've heard nothing but good things about. Like, for example, The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Like, I'm not saying they're bad or they don't deserve a spot there. I'm just saying it's a bit more debatable than something like, you know I'm going to say it, Lord of the Rings, right? Another thing that bothered me is that the series problem. Now, I understand it's 100 books. I guess I would have preferred the best 100 works of fantasy of all time. Because, so they have, for example, 2 out of the 7 Harry Potter books. Why can't you just shove in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and have it stand in for the Harry Potter series? Like, they have 2 out of the 3 His Dark Materials novels. Okay, and then the 3 Lord of the Rings books. And Lord of the Rings is technically 1 book. And yeah, I know I'm being a pretentious fantasy snob when I say that, but sue me. And then they have 2 Narnia books. And then 2 of the Time Quintet books. And some authors have more than 1 work represented, but others have just 1. And you have some works which are glaringly missing from the list. And I was like, come on, really? And I'm defending authors I haven't even read here, right? I'm thinking of something like the Malazan Book of the Fallen series or the works of Joe Abercrombie. Like, they're major chunks of the fantasy canon that aren't even present at all on this list. And you have like 2 different titles by Roald Dahl. You have like 3 different Arthurian fantasy entries. And even then, I'm like, but why choose these? Like, The Mists of Avalon wasn't on there. I was very offended by that. It just didn't make much sense. Also, there's a huge time gap between the Arabian Nights, 9th century, and then Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Malory, which is what, 15th or 16th century? Why not La Chanson de Roland? Why not the Arthurian works of Chrétien de Troyes, which is like 12th century if you're going to go for Arthurian content? Now, to be fair, there's a fair amount of diversity on that list, but the way it's done is a bit black and white too, because you'll have authors from Asia and Africa, which is cool. Authors I've never heard of, so good for their representation and hopefully their works will be picked up more. But then it's all English language authors on the other hand. Where are the other European authors? Where are the Brothers Grimm? Or hell, where's Charles Perrault? I mean, Brothers Grimm took a lot of their stuff from Charles Perrault, which is antecedent to them, so yeah, whatever. Or Hans Christian Andersen, or works in French, or works from Spain. I don't know. There's no internal logic to this list, and it annoyed me. It really annoyed me. Plus the fact that, see, you want to go for diversity points. Okay, fine, cool. But then you give some authors 2-3 different entries. So why put in like 2-3 books by Roald Dahl, but just one Sanderson book? And they give 2 books from like Harry Potter and His Dark Materials, but only 1 book by Sanderson. And then, like I said, nothing from someone like Joe Abercrombie. No Robin Hobb. I will say, though, there is Ursula K. Le Guin representation, so I stand that, of course. But even then, unfair. Just put in A Wizard of Earthsea. Why do you have to put Wizard of Earthsea and The Tombs of Atuan, but then not the other novels? They're not even arguably necessarily the best of the Earthsea books. Like, I think Tahanu is one of the best of the series. But then, of course, those books were picked by authors. Again, I might be extremely naive when it comes to these types of things, but I expected they would actually dedicate actual time and thought to this list. Perhaps hire, I don't know, an academic, but not necessarily in the stuffy ivory tower sense, just someone who is really passionate about fantasy literature throughout the ages and throughout culture and civilization. Someone who would have also, I don't know, polled fantasy fans on the internet on something like Reddit, Twitter, or Goodreads. Just something a bit more serious, a bit more, I don't want to say academic, but just something with a bit more thought behind it. Not just ask a panel of authors like, who do you like? And I'm like, sorry, but some of these authors who are on the panel are also on the list. I'm like, really? I mean, fine. Maybe they didn't plug their own works. And, as such, there's nothing criminal about that, right? You can be proud of your own works. I get that. Like, A Storm of Swords is on there, so yay, A Song of Ice and Fire is on there. There's a Wheel of Time book on there, so those series are acknowledged. But yeah, there's some glaring snubs on that list, and I'm like, some entries, I'm just like, I'm sorry, I'm straight up gonna question the validity of their being on that list. It might sound mean, it might sound petty, but like I said, this is about being annoyed at frivolous shit. So, City of Glass is on there, from the Mortal Instruments. Really? Really? Six of Crows is on there. Now, I haven't actually read that book, but from what I've seen in any case, a lot of people contest it being on there at the expense of something else, for example. Now, that's a minor quibble. They mixed in children's fantasy and adult fantasy. That would not have been my personal preference, but fine. It is fantasy as a whole, so that's cool. Another thing that bugged me is Dragonflight is on there. Sorry, it's not fantasy. You can debate that with me if you wish. We can have a conversation about it. I do not find that the Chronicles of Pen are fantasy. They are science fiction. Science fantasy at best, I might give you that. But then if you want to add science fantasy entries, that's another slew of books you're just snubbing here. Like, some people consider Dune science fantasy. How could you not put Dune if you're going to consider it science fantasy, but you're going to put Dragonflight? Like, I'm sorry, just because they're dragons does not mean it's fantasy. And if it's because, there's telepathy and shit, there's a lot of older sci-fi that deals with, like, paranormal abilities, so come on. Not fantasy. I disagree. So, coming back to that Cassandra Clare entry, don't get me wrong, I read The Mortal Instruments. I enjoyed The Mortal Instruments. Do I think it really deserves to be on that list? A list that is supposed to represent the best of fantasy throughout the ages? No, I don't. Now, one of the criteria for selecting these books was influence. So perhaps you could say, the influence of the YA genre. Okay, but then on that metric alone, why go for The Mortal Instruments, but not Twilight? I don't like Twilight. I don't think it has much literary merit, but it was most definitely influential. But then you could argue, if you're going to go for influence, why isn't Dracula on there? Because it's a bit horror, but fine, but they're taking all sorts of fantasy into account because Dragonflight is on there. So you see what I mean? There's no rhyme or reason to this list. And I know they said from the 9th century onwards, which, I mean, they could have included, like I said, the works of Chrétien de Troyes or the works of Charles Perrault, the Brothers Grimm. It's cool that they include the Arabian Nights, though. Like I said, I'm not critiquing the books themselves, or some of them I am. I'll admit to that. But like the diverse authors, I'm all for that. And the Arabian Nights, yes, is a very big part of fantastical literature. I agree with that. But I'm like, okay, they include Circe and the Song of Achilles in there, but you're not going to mention the Iliad or the Odyssey again. Really? Really? If you're going to go for mythical fantasy, go to the OG source. I don't know. I don't get this list. It annoyed me. I got it off my chest. I feel much better now. So yeah, that was my hot take on the Times 100 best fantasy books of all time. I think it is clickbait. It is not an accurate title, but even as a list, I don't really think it's a good list because there's not much rhyme or reason to it. Being said, there are very good titles on that list as well. A lot of works that I've loved. So again, I'm not bashing the books on that list. I might have pseudo-bashed a couple, but it's in good fun, right? But most of these books, yeah, I'm not disputing their literary merits as such, except for a couple. So I'm kind of curious because I feel like this list already has had quite a bit of backlash. Are they going to dare and try and do this with science fiction or dystopian literature? I kind of want them to, so I can get annoyed at those lists as well. That's all for this video. Was it fairly pointless and just me indulging myself? Absolutely. But sometimes you need to do that. Am I right? So I hope you'll have a lovely day, evening, morning, or whichever you prefer. And I shall see you in the next video. Bye-bye.